My name's Bradley. And today I'm going to tell you a story that started with love and ended with me walking out of my own rehearsal dinner because my fiancée and her parents publicly mocked me and disrespected the memory of my late mother, who died from cancer 5 years ago. Some people might say I overreacted or that I should have just shrugged it off for the sake of peace. But I want you to hear the full story first. I will take you back to the very beginning so you understand how we got there. So if you're willing to listen with an open mind, I'll tell you everything. The good, the confusing, the humiliating, and the part where I finally said, enough. I met Catherine, the lady I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, online. I was actually scrolling through Facebook and stumbled on a post about pets. I've always had a soft spot for animals. Growing up, we had a few dogs. So anytime I come across pet-related posts, especially ones where people are sharing their thoughts or experiences, I tend to read through the comments. That day, one comment caught my eye. It was from someone named Catherine. She had a take that was different. While everyone else was agreeing and sharing similar stories, her comment stood out. It was critical, and she actually made a solid argument and backed it up with points that made me pause and think. I could tell right away she wasn't just throwing words around. She knew what she was talking about. Instead of replying publicly, I did something I rarely do. I sent her a message directly. I asked her a question based on what she had said, just to understand more. I honestly didn't expect her to respond, but she did reply thoughtfully, like she was genuinely interested in having the conversation. That first chat ended up being way longer than I imagined. We talked about dogs, cats, our experiences growing up with pets, and how people often misunderstand animal behavior. It didn't feel like a casual chat. It felt like talking to someone who saw the world in a very clear, intelligent way. That's when I found out she was a veterinarian. That explained a lot. She wasn't just smart. She clearly cared about what she did. The more we talked, the more I looked forward to our chats. It started as random messages now and then, but it quickly turned into something regular as weeks went by. I remember thinking, I don't know what this is yet, but it feels good. In a world where everyone's rushing into things, that slow, genuine connection meant a lot to me. After a few weeks of talking online, I eventually asked Catherine for her number. She gave it to me without hesitation, and from there, our conversations picked up more frequently. Texting led to calling, and calling turned into long, late-night talks about life, pets, and work. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I asked her if she was seeing anyone, just to be sure I wasn't misreading anything. She laughed a little and told me she wasn't, and that's when I asked if she'd be comfortable meeting in person. She said yes. When we finally met, it was even better than I expected. You know how sometimes people look totally different from their pictures online? That wasn't the case here. She was even more beautiful in real life, and what stood out even more was her presence. And that made an impression on me. We kept seeing each other after that, and our connection kept growing stronger. I already know that I liked her a lot more than I was ready to admit at first. So I said to her one day, I really like you, Catherine. She smiled and told me she liked me too. That was how we began dating. Our relationship was peaceful. That's the best way I can describe it. We respected each other's space. Over the years of dating, we built something that felt solid. And eventually, conversations about the future started happening naturally. One thing that made me feel really connected to Catherine was how she seemed to understand and respect my past. I lost my mother to cancer 5 years before I met her. It's not something I talk about lightly, but she never rushed me to open up. When I did, she listened. She asked questions to know more about the woman who raised me. She told me once that she admired how close I was to my mom and that she hoped I'd always keep that bond alive in some way. At the time, I really believed she meant that. Looking back now, I can't really say. The first time I met Catherine's parents was the beginning of the end. Now here's something you should know. Catherine never acted like she came for money. Not once did she brag or show off anything that hinted she had wealthy parents. She was down to earth in our conversations, funny, warm, and very focused on her work. I knew she was a veterinarian, and I respected that a lot. She made good money, definitely more than I did, but it never felt like a power imbalance. I wasn't struggling either. I had a decent job, was doing well for my age, and I was proud of what I was building for myself. Still, I wasn't in her financial bracket, and that became very clear when I visited her family's home for the first time. I remember walking up to their place and just feeling out of place. Everything was perfectly polished. From the moment I walked in, I felt the weight of being judged. Catherine's parents didn't try to hide their lack of acceptance. Her father looked at me like I was a charity case walking into his world uninvited. And her mother? She barely smiled the whole time. I tried to stay polite, make conversation, and show them I genuinely cared about their daughter. But nothing seemed to land. The moment that opened my eyes was when her dad and I were sitting in their living room, and her father leaned in, serious face, and asked, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" I told him, plainly and respectfully, that I intended to marry her, that I loved her. But that wasn't enough. He followed up with, "What do you do for a living?" I answered truthfully, and he hit me with the next line. "Can that job earn enough to take care of my daughter? Or is she going to be the one taking care of you?" That question hit hard. It was blunt and degrading. He'd already decided I was just after his daughter's money. I was caught off guard, and I didn't know how to respond in a way that didn't come off as either defensive or disrespectful. So I just sat there, stunned, trying to keep my composure. The visit ended on an even worse note. As we were about to leave, her mother asked to speak to me privately. I followed her to the hallway, thinking maybe she wanted to have a more honest conversation or even give me a chance. But she didn't. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should stay away from my daughter." I walked out of that house completely humiliated, my mind racing with doubts. I figured we'd part ways that night. But when I told Catherine about everything that happened, how cold her parents were, how disrespected I felt, she just brushed it off. She said, "That's just how they are. They wanted to see if you were strong-willed, if you could handle them." And honestly, I believed her. I wanted to believe that love could overcome all that. But looking back, I realized that I should have stayed away. So I kept going with the relationship. I even ended up buying the most expensive ring I could afford at the time to propose to her. I wanted to show her how serious I was about our future. And, well, Catherine said yes. She was over the moon, thrilled even. So the wedding preparations kick off. But from the start, it didn't take long to realize that things weren't exactly as they seemed. Catherine's parents quickly took over the planning process. Now, I get it, they wanted to help, but it was way more than that. It felt like they were running the show. They were making decisions without even consulting me. I had to go to them for approval on every little thing. It wasn't like I was asking for too much. I just wanted to have a say in what was supposed to be my wedding too. But instead, they made it clear that their opinion came first, and I had to bow to it. I tried to talk to Catherine about it, but every time I brought it up, she'd brush it off. "They have sophisticated taste," she'd say. "You know how they are." And I'd tell myself, okay, maybe it's just their way of showing they care. I wanted to believe that. But as the weeks went on and the wedding date grew closer, something started to shift. Catherine, who once promised me that we'd be in this together, started pulling away. She spent more and more time with her family, making decisions without asking me. We spend less and less time when we see. The once easy conversations we had turned into awkward silences. If I tried to talk to her about how things were changing, it was like I was talking to a wall. And that's when the arguments started. We fought about everything, and every time we disagreed, Catherine refused to talk it through. She wouldn't try to understand where I was coming from. She'd just go silent. And honestly, that hurt. It hurt more than I was willing to admit at the time. At first, I tried to push and get us to communicate, to figure things out like adults. But after a while, I realized that wasn't working. So I did what I've always done in difficult situations. I swallowed my ego and compromised on things that mattered to me just to get her talking again. But the more I did that, the more I felt like I was losing myself in the process. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about how we were dealing with everything. And with every argument, with every unspoken word between us, I began to doubt whether this marriage was even the right choice anymore. I started wondering if this was the life I wanted, or if I was just going along with it because I didn't want to let go of something I thought would make me happy. As the days dragged on, the weight of these questions only grew heavier. I could feel the distance growing between us, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. 1 week before the wedding, we were supposed to have a rehearsal dinner to get everything in place before the big day. Catherine's parents had chosen this lavish venue, pulling out all the stops, trying to show off for everyone. Everyone was invited: friends, family, colleagues. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a prelude to the celebration of love, but it quickly turned into something else entirely. The dinner was just getting started when Catherine's father stood up to make his humorous toast. I had no idea what to expect, but I wasn't ready for what came next. He started with a joke, talking about my humble beginnings. He made this comment about how he never thought his daughter would want to marry a man who couldn't even take care of his own mother. And, here we are. A few people laughed, but I didn't. I couldn't. My mother had passed away some years ago from cancer, and I'd been her primary caretaker. It wasn't easy, but it was my responsibility, my love for her, that got me through those years. And here he was, casually mocking that in front of everyone. I looked at Catherine, expecting her to stand up for me, to put a stop to it. But instead, she leaned in towards me and whispered with a laugh, "Relax. It's just banter. Don't be so sensitive." At that moment, I knew I wasn't going to let this slide. I stood up slowly. I knew I had to say something. I wasn't going to just sit there and pretend like everything was okay. I looked around the room as all eyes were on me, and everyone was waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. But I need to be honest with you all. I was prepared to spend the rest of my life with Catherine. But if this is how she and her family honor the dead, if this is how they mock my mother and treat people they deem less, then I've made a mistake." There were gasps that rippled across the room. I saw Catherine's face go from amusement to shock in an instant. I finished my statement with one last thank you, and without waiting for anyone to respond, I turned to walk away. I could feel all eyes on me, but I didn't care. I had made my decision. But before I could reach the door, Catherine ran up to me, angry. "You embarrassed me," she yelled. "You made a scene in front of everyone." I turned to face her, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was more upset about the public humiliation than the fact that her father had just mocked my mother's death. She was defending him and didn't even see the problem. I shook my head, disappointed beyond words, and said, "Go to hell, alongside your family." I turned back to the door, walking away from everything I thought I knew. And as for Catherine, well, she didn't follow me out. She just stood there, stunned and speechless at what I just told her. After everything went down at the rehearsal dinner, I needed to reset. I knew I had to focus on myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about anyone else's expectations. I took a step back from relationships entirely and poured myself into my work and into my personal growth. I knew now that true love would come when it was meant to, but it couldn't be at the expense of my self-respect. Catherine did try reaching out a few times after everything went down. I didn't respond. I realized there was no point because I had no intention of continuing a relationship where I wasn't respected. I had already made my decision, and there was nothing more to say. As I moved forward, I learned a lot from that entire experience. Things I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, even though it was a painful one. But that's how life works, right? You go through something, it breaks you for a while, but you get stronger from it. Here's what I want to share with you all, the lessons I took away from all of this. 1. People reveal themselves in how they treat the powerless or the absent. It's easy to be kind to someone who can do something for you. But watch how they act toward people who can't give them anything. Watch how they treat people who don't have power. That's when you really see the truth about who they are. Never ignore red flags just because you want things to work. I saw the red flags early on. Her family didn't like me from the start, and I made excuses for it and believed her excuses. If I had listened to the warning signs and trusted my gut, maybe I wouldn't have ended up in that situation. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how much you want it to work. Walk away the moment they mock your pain. That rehearsal dinner showed me something I can never unsee. The moment they mocked my pain, it was over. If someone disrespects you that much, you owe it to yourself to walk away. There's no love or loyalty left at that point. They've already shown you who they are, and you don't need to stick around to prove anything. But I'm curious, what would you have done? What if it were your fiancé's family mocking your late mother like that? Would you have stayed or walked away? I know what I did, and I know I'm not going to let anyone else disrespect me like that. Thanks for sticking with me through this story, and I hope it gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. See you in the next one.